Imagine meeting someone for the very first time. They're confident, warm, easy to talk to. Within minutes, you find yourself thinking, I can trust this person. But months later, you realize the person you believed in never truly existed. The signs were always there. You just didn't know how to recognize them. What if the biggest mistakes we make about people aren't caused by bad judgment, but by simply paying attention to the wrong things? In the next hour, you'll discover why behavior always reveals more than words, why first impressions can be dangerously misleading, and how understanding a few timeless principles of human nature can completely change the way you build relationships and judge character. Based on the powerful insights from this book, you'll learn how to observe people more clearly, avoid costly misunderstandings, and develop the emotional awareness to see what most people miss. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Most people are performing, not being themselves. Imagine you've just started a new job. On your first morning, everything feels almost perfect. Your manager greets you with a warm smile. Your coworkers seem friendly. Everyone offers to help. Someone even says, if you ever need anything, just let us know. You leave that first day feeling relieved. Maybe I finally found the right place. Weeks pass, then months. The deadlines become tighter. Mistakes begin happening. Pressure slowly replaces excitement. And almost overnight, the people you thought you knew begin acting differently. The manager who once seemed endlessly patient now loses his temper over small problems. The coworker who always smiled begins avoiding responsibility. The person who promised, we're all one team, suddenly becomes concerned only with protecting themselves. You sit there wondering, were they pretending in the beginning, or are they changing now? It's a question almost everyone asks at some point in life, not only at work, but in friendships, relationships, business, even within families. The truth is, most people aren't deliberately trying to deceive you. Something much more human is happening, and understanding that single idea may completely change the way you see everyone around you. The version we want others to see when we meet someone for the first time, we're rarely showing them our complete selves. Instead, we instinctively present the version we believe will be accepted, the version we hope people will like, the version least likely to be rejected. Without realizing it, almost everyone does this. Some people become funnier, some become quieter, some become more confident, others become more agreeable, not because they're dishonest, but because every human being wants to belong. That desire is older than civilization itself. For thousands of years, acceptance meant survival. Being rejected by your group could mean danger. Even though the world has changed, our brains still carry many of those ancient instincts. We still want approval, we still fear rejection, and we still adjust ourselves, often without even noticing. This is why first impressions can be so misleading. You're not always meeting someone's complete character. You're often meeting the version they believe the situation requires. We learn this long before adulthood. Think about a young child. A child doesn't arrive in the world worrying about reputation, or popularity, or status. But slowly, something begins changing. The child learns that certain behaviors receive praise, others receive criticism. They discover that saying the right thing makes adults smile, that following the rules earns approval, that hiding certain emotions sometimes feels safer than expressing them. Little by little, they begin adapting, not because they're manipulative, because they're learning how to exist in the world around them. As the years pass, school replaces home, then work replaces school. The environment changes, but the habit remains. Many adults continue asking the very same question they asked as children. Only now, they ask it silently. Who do I need to become so people will accept me? Different rooms. Create different people. Imagine watching the same person throughout a single day. At 9 o'clock, they're sitting inside an important business meeting. Their posture is straight. Their words are carefully chosen. Every sentence sounds professional. A few hours later, they're having lunch with old friends. The laughter becomes louder. The jokes become more relaxed. That evening, they return home. Around family, an entirely different personality appears. The serious executive disappears. The playful parent emerges. Later that night, they're alone. No audience, no expectations, no one left to impress. Which version is the real one? Perhaps each version contains part of the truth, because human beings naturally adapt to different environments. The mistake isn't adapting. The mistake is assuming every version tells the whole story. Real character appears when performance becomes difficult. Most performances have something in common. They require energy. The longer someone tries to maintain an image, the harder it becomes, especially when life becomes difficult. Pressure changes everything. Deadlines, conflict, failure, disappointment. These moments demand immediate reactions, and immediate reactions leave very little time to perform. That's why difficult situations often reveal qualities that comfortable situations keep hidden. Someone who appears endlessly patient may suddenly become impatient. Someone who constantly speaks about loyalty may disappear when loyalty becomes inconvenient. Someone who proudly calls themselves honest may begin hiding the truth when honesty carries consequences. Pressure didn't create those qualities. It simply removed the energy required to keep hiding them. This is why experienced observers never judge people too quickly. Time and pressure reveal what first impressions rarely can. Reflection. Take a moment. Think about someone who completely surprised you. Perhaps they seemed trustworthy until they weren't. Or perhaps someone you underestimated became one of the most dependable people in your life. Now ask yourself one question. Did they truly change? Or did time simply reveal the parts of themselves that you hadn't seen before? Because understanding people doesn't begin by judging them. It begins by patiently observing them, not for one conversation, not for one day, but long enough for patterns to appear. Chapter 1 Summary. The first lesson of this audiobook is both simple and incredibly powerful. Most people are not showing you their complete selves when you first meet them. They're showing you the version they believe fits the moment. That doesn't make them dishonest. It makes them human. Real character isn't discovered through first impressions. It isn't discovered through confident words. It isn't discovered through promises. It reveals itself slowly, through consistent behavior, through repeated choices, and most clearly, when life becomes difficult. The more patiently you observe, the less often you'll be surprised by people. Because the truth about human nature has always been there. You simply needed to know. Transition. If first impressions don't reveal the whole truth, then what does? In the next chapter, we'll discover why behavior always speaks louder than words, and why the smallest actions often reveal what the longest conversations never can. Theomin, chapter 1 này mạnh hơn bản cũ rất nhiều vì mở bằng một câu chuyện hoàn chỉnh thay vì một ví dụ ngắn. Có 3 lớp cảm xúc: tò mò, nhận ra, chiêm nghiệm. Mạch kể giống một Netflix documentary hơn là một bài giảng. Vẫn giữ đúng thông điệp cốt lõi của chương gốc. Con người thường thể hiện phiên bản họ muốn người khác nhìn thấy, và chỉ qua thời gian cùng hành vi lặp lại mới thấy được bản chất. Chapter 2, Behavior reveals what words try to hide. Imagine meeting two different people. The first tells you, you can always count on me. The second says very little. They don't make promises. They don't try to impress you. Months later, one disappears the moment life becomes inconvenient. The other quietly stands beside you when you need them most. Who would you trust? The answer seems obvious. Yet, every day, people continue making the same mistake. They trust words before they trust behavior. They believe confidence is the same as competence. They mistake charm for character, and they assume that sincerity can always be heard in someone's voice. But human behavior doesn't work that way. Words can be carefully chosen, practiced, polished, even rehearsed. Behavior has no such luxury. Sooner or later, every person's actions begin telling the truth. And that truth is often very different from the story they tell about themselves, who someone wants to be. Think about how people usually introduce themselves. Very few will say, I'm impatient. I struggle to keep my promises. I avoid responsibility. Instead, people naturally describe the version of themselves they hope others will believe. I'm honest. I'm loyal. I'm hardworking. I'm a good friend. None of these statements are necessarily false, but they aren't proof either. They're aspirations, intentions, or sometimes simply self-perception. The problem is that people often confuse identity with behavior. Someone may genuinely believe they're patient until life tests that patience. Someone may believe they're generous until generosity requires sacrifice. Someone may believe they're honest until honesty carries a personal cost. That's why listening only to words can be misleading. Words tell you how people see themselves. Behavior tells you who they repeatedly choose to become. One mistake doesn't define a person, neither does one kind gesture. Anyone can have a bad day. Anyone can have a good day. The real question isn't what did they do once? It's what did they do consistently? Patterns reveal character. Imagine a friend who cancels plans once because of an emergency. That's understandable. Now imagine they cancel every second or third meeting, always with a convincing explanation, always with a reasonable excuse. Individually, each excuse sounds believable. Together, they reveal a pattern, and patterns are difficult to fake. The same is true for kindness. One compliment means very little, but years of encouragement, years of reliability, years of showing up when it matters. Those are not isolated moments, they are evidence of character. Magnetic observers don't rush to conclusions, they collect patterns, because patterns are far more reliable than isolated events. Pressure removes the mask. It's when everything is going well. It's easy to seem generous when nothing is being asked of you. It's easy to speak about integrity when no difficult decisions need to be made. Comfort rarely reveals character. Pressure does. Think about the last time you faced an unexpected setback. Perhaps someone criticized you unfairly, a plan fell apart, or life simply refused to go the way you expected. How did you respond? Now ask the same question about the people around you. Did they become calm or defensive? Did they accept responsibility or immediately look for someone else to blame? Did they protect others or only themselves? Pressure doesn't create character, it reveals it. The qualities that remain hidden during easy moments often become impossible to ignore when life becomes difficult. That's why experienced observers never judge someone too quickly. They know that time and pressure will eventually answer questions that words never can. Listen. Less to promises, more to habits. Promises are reconvincing. Anyone can promise to change, to be more reliable, more patient, more disciplined. But promises describe the future. Habits describe the present. If someone repeatedly says they value honesty, watch how they speak about people who aren't in the room. If someone says family comes first, notice where they consistently invest their time. If someone claims they respect others, observe how they treat people who can offer them nothing in return. The smallest daily habits often reveal the biggest truths, because habits require no audience, no performance, no applause. They simply reflect who someone has become. When words and habits point in the same direction, trust grows naturally. When they constantly move in opposite directions, pay attention. Behavior is quietly telling you something words never will. Reflection. Think about the people you trust most today. Was that trust built because of something they once told you, or because of what you've seen them do? Again and again and again? Now think about someone who disappointed you. Looking back, were the warning signs really invisible, or were they hidden inside small behaviors that you chose to overlook because their words sounded more convincing? One of the greatest skills you can develop is learning to observe patiently, not searching for perfection, but searching for consistency. Because consistency, more than confidence, is where true character lives. Transition. Now that we've learned why behavior speaks louder than words, a deeper question naturally follows. If actions reveal the truth, why do so many people fail to notice what's right in front of them? The answer lies in one of the strongest forces shaping human judgment, our emotions. And that's exactly where we'll go next. Chapter 3. Why Emotions Blind Your Judgment. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm. The wind is powerful. Rain is falling from every direction. Your vision becomes blurred. Even familiar paths suddenly feel unfamiliar. Now imagine trying to make an important decision in that moment. Would you trust your judgment? Probably not. Yet emotionally, that's exactly how many people live every day. When emotions become intense, they don't simply influence our decisions, they reshape the way we see reality itself. That's why intelligent people sometimes trust the wrong person, remain in unhealthy relationships, ignore obvious warning signs, or make decisions they later struggle to understand, not because they lack intelligence, but because emotion has quietly taken control of perception. Wesson. See reality, it sees what it expects. Most people believe they observe the world objectively. But the human mind rarely works that way. Instead, it constantly searches for evidence that supports what it already believes. Imagine meeting someone who makes an excellent first impression. They're confident, friendly, they remember your name, they make you laugh. Almost immediately, your brain begins creating a story. This person is trustworthy. From that moment forward, something remarkable happens. You begin noticing everything that confirms that belief: their kindness, their generosity, their confidence. At the very same time, you unconsciously overlook the small inconsistencies, the missed promises, the subtle contradictions, the moments that don't quite fit the image you've already created. Not because you're careless, but because your mind prefers consistency. Once it reaches a conclusion, it naturally begins protecting it. That's why first impressions can become surprisingly powerful, not because they're always accurate, but because they influence everything that follows. Think back to a time when you were extremely excited. Perhaps you had just started a new relationship, accepted a new job, or discovered an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. Everything felt promising. Hope replaced caution. Possibility replaced skepticism. In moments like these, the mind often stops asking difficult questions because asking questions feels like threatening something we desperately want to believe. The opposite is equally true. Fear changes perception as well. When someone expects betrayal, even innocent actions may begin looking suspicious. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A simple disagreement feels like conflict. Silence suddenly seems full of hidden meaning. Hope can blind us. Fear can blind us. Different emotions, the same result. Clear observation slowly disappears. That's why emotionally intelligent people don't ignore their feelings. But they also don't allow feelings to become the only evidence they trust. They recognize emotion. Then they return to observation, because behavior remains far more reliable than emotion alone. Time reveals what emotion hides. The advantages you can give yourself is time. People often make their biggest mistakes, not because they chose the wrong person, but because they chose too quickly. Real character isn't revealed in one conversation or one impressive gesture. It appears gradually, through ordinary days, unexpected disappointments, repeated decisions. That's why patience is such a powerful form of wisdom. When you stop rushing to reach conclusions, you begin noticing details that once escaped your attention. You see consistency or inconsistency, promises or excuses, growth or repeated patterns. Time has a way of exposing what excitement often hides. Eventually, every performance becomes exhausting, and sooner or later, authenticity begins replacing performance. The question is, will you still be paying attention when that happens? Distance creates clarity. When emotions become overwhelming, the best decision isn't always to react. Sometimes the wisest decision is simply to pause. Distance has a remarkable effect on the mind. Think about an argument you've had in the past. In the heat of the moment, everything felt urgent. Every word seemed personal. Every emotion demanded an immediate response. But days later, perhaps even hours later, the situation looked completely different. The facts hadn't changed, only your emotional distance had. That distance allowed reason to return. Great observers understand this principle. They don't force immediate conclusions, especially when emotions are strongest. Instead, they create space, space to think, space to observe, space for patterns to become clearer. Because clarity rarely arrives in emotional chaos. It usually arrives after the noise has settled. Reflection. Think about one decision you've regretted. Was it made from calm observation or from intense emotion? Now think about one of the best decisions you've ever made. Did it happen because you reacted immediately or because you gave yourself enough time to see the situation more clearly? Perhaps wisdom isn't about feeling less. Perhaps it's about allowing your emotions to speak without allowing them to become the final judge. Because emotions are valuable. They tell you something important is happening, but they don't always tell you what's actually true. Transition. Understanding your own emotions is only the first step. The next challenge is learning to recognize something even more subtle. The invisible patterns hidden inside other people's behavior. Because once you learn to recognize those patterns, you'll begin seeing what most people completely miss. Chapter 4. The hidden patterns that predict human behavior. Imagine you're standing in a busy airport. Hundreds of people walk past you every minute. Some are rushing toward their gates. Others are saying emotional goodbyes. Some appear confident. Others look anxious. At first, everything feels random, like complete chaos. But then you notice something interesting. A security officer standing nearby isn't looking at everyone. His eyes don't follow the loudest traveler or the person wearing the most expensive clothes. Instead, he's watching something almost invisible. Small patterns. Who keeps looking over their shoulder? Who suddenly changes direction? Who behaves differently from everyone else? To most people, those details mean nothing. To someone trained to observe, they mean everything. Because the truth is, human behavior is rarely random. People repeat themselves far more often than they realize. The words may change, the circumstances may change, even the people around them may change. But their patterns often remain surprisingly consistent. And once you learn to recognize those patterns, you'll begin understanding people in a completely different way. Patterns are more honest than promises. Most people judge others by isolated moments. One generous act, one apology, one impressive conversation, one disappointing mistake. But isolated moments rarely tell the whole story. Anyone can be kind for a day. Anyone can lose their temper once. Anyone can make one excellent decision. The real question isn't what did they do? The better question is, how often do they do it? Character isn't built from isolated moments. It's revealed through repetition. What someone repeatedly chooses eventually becomes who they are. That's why experienced observers never rush to conclusions. They patiently collect evidence, not to judge people, but to understand them accurately. Small habits reveal big truths. Most people expect character to reveal itself during dramatic moments. A financial crisis, a heated argument, a life-changing decision. Sometimes it does. But much more often, character quietly reveals itself through ordinary habits. Notice how someone treats people who cannot offer them anything in return. Notice whether they arrive when they said they would. Notice how they respond after making a mistake. Do they accept responsibility or immediately begin searching for excuses? None of these moments seem particularly important, yet together they create a pattern. And patterns rarely lie. Words describe intentions. Habits reveal identity. That's why paying attention to small actions often teaches you far more than listening to long explanations. Consistency builds character. Imagine two friends. The first occasionally does extraordinary things. They buy expensive gifts, make big promises, offer dramatic apologies. But those moments are separated by long periods of disappointment. The second friend is different. No dramatic speeches, no grand gestures. They simply show up, again, and again, and again. Who would you trust more? For most people, the answer is obvious. Consistency creates certainty, and certainty creates trust. People rarely build confidence in others because of extraordinary moments. They build confidence because ordinary moments remain consistent over time. Kindness practiced once is memorable. Kindness practiced for years becomes character. The same is true for honesty, responsibility, respect, and loyalty. Real character doesn't appear occasionally. It becomes predictable. Observe choices, not intentions. Almost everyone has good intentions. Most people genuinely want to become better, more patient, more disciplined, more honest. But intention alone changes nothing. Life is shaped by choices. Every single day, people reveal what truly matters to them, not through what they say, but through where they spend their time, where they invest their energy, what they repeatedly choose when nobody is reminding them. Those daily decisions slowly become habits. Those habits become patterns, and those patterns eventually become a person's reputation. This is why actions accumulated over time will always tell a more reliable story than promises made in a single conversation. Reflection. Think about someone you've known for many years. Now forget everything they've ever told you about themselves. Forget their opinions. Forget their promises. Forget the image they tried to present. Instead, look only at their repeated behavior. What patterns do you see? Those patterns, more than anything they've ever said, reveal who they truly are. Now ask yourself the same question. If someone quietly observed your daily habits for the next year, without listening to a single word you spoke, what story would your actions tell? Because every day, whether we realize it or not, we're teaching people who we are, not with our words, but with our patterns. Chapter 4, Summary. Human behavior is rarely random. The more closely you observe, the more clearly you'll notice consistent patterns. Small habits become routines. Routines become character. And character quietly shapes every decision a person makes. Don't be distracted by isolated moments. Watch what repeats. Watch what remains consistent. Because while words often describe the person someone hopes to become, patterns reveal the person they already are. And once you learn to recognize those patterns, you'll stop being surprised by people, because you'll finally understand what their behavior has been telling you all along. Transition patterns reveal character over time. But there is one force capable of exposing those patterns almost instantly: pressure. Because when comfort disappears, people no longer have the luxury of carefully managing the image they present to the world. And that's exactly where we'll go next. Pressure doesn't build character, it reveals it. Imagine holding a piece of coal in your hand. From the outside, it appears ordinary, unremarkable. Nothing about it suggests extraordinary strength. But deep beneath the earth, as pressure increases, something remarkable begins to happen. The pressure doesn't create something entirely new. It reveals what the material is capable of becoming. Human character works in much the same way. Most people believe pressure changes people, that difficult circumstances somehow transform a good person into a bad one, or suddenly turn an ordinary person into an exceptional leader. But that's rarely what happens. Pressure doesn't invent character. It exposes it. When life is comfortable, almost anyone can appear patient, generous, understanding, confident. But when plans collapse, when expectations are shattered, when emotions run high, the version of ourselves that appears in those moments is often the one we've spent years trying to hide. And that's exactly why pressure becomes one of the most honest tests of character. People to perform. Think about a typical day when everything goes according to plan. You wake up on time, traffic isn't too bad, work progresses smoothly, people are polite, nothing unexpected happens. On days like these, it's relatively easy to remain calm, easy to be patient, easy to smile, easy to appear emotionally balanced. But life doesn't remain comfortable forever. Eventually, something interrupts the routine. A promise is broken. A mistake is made. Someone criticizes you unfairly, or an opportunity you've worked towards suddenly disappears. That's when the performance begins to crack. Not because the situation changed who you are, but because comfort was no longer protecting the version of yourself you wanted others to see. Pressure removes convenience, and once convenience disappears, character begins speaking for itself. Watch people's first instinct. One of the most revealing moments in any person's life comes within the first few seconds after something goes wrong. Do they immediately blame someone else? Do they become defensive? Do they deny responsibility? Or do they pause, take a breath, and try to understand what happened? Those first reactions often reveal habits developed over many years. Because under pressure, there is very little time to perform. People usually fall back on what is familiar. Someone who has practiced patience will naturally become calmer. Someone who has practiced responsibility will naturally look for solutions. Someone who has spent years protecting their ego will often search for excuses before searching for answers. That's why experienced observers pay close attention during difficult moments. Not because they enjoy watching people struggle, but because those moments reveal truths that comfort often keeps hidden. Adversity reveals priorities. Pressure doesn't only expose personality, it also exposes priorities. Imagine two business partners facing a financial crisis. One immediately begins asking, how do we protect the people depending on us? The other asks, how do I protect myself? The crisis is identical, yet the priorities are completely different. The same principle applies everywhere, within families, friendships, relationships, leadership. When life becomes difficult, what people choose to protect first often reveals what they value most. Money can be recovered, opportunities can return, reputations can be rebuilt. But values become visible only when they cost something. It's easy to speak about loyalty when loyalty requires nothing. It's easy to speak about honesty when honesty carries no consequences. Real values appear only when keeping them becomes difficult. That's when words stop leading, and character quietly takes over. Observe rec. Everyone fails. Everyone loses control occasionally. Everyone has moments they wish they could take back. One mistake doesn't define a lifetime. The more important question is, what happens afterward? Do they apologize sincerely? Do they accept responsibility? Do they learn from the experience? Or do they repeat the same behavior again and again and again? Wise observers don't judge people solely by their worst day. They watch how people recover, because recovery reveals something failure alone never can. Humility, growth, accountability, the willingness to improve. Some people fall, then become stronger. Others repeat the same mistake for years, while insisting nothing is wrong. Failure itself isn't the greatest warning sign. Refusing to learn from failure often is. Pressure reveals you too. It's easy to spend this chapter thinking about other people, but perhaps the most valuable lesson isn't about observing them. It's about observing yourself. How do you respond when life doesn't go according to plan? Do you become defensive? Do you look for someone to blame? Do you allow fear to make your decisions? Or do you slow down, accept reality, and begin searching for the next right step? The same principles you've used to understand others can become powerful tools for understanding yourself. Because self-awareness always comes before personal growth. And the people who grow the most are usually those willing to observe themselves as honestly as they observe everyone else. Reflection. Think about one of the hardest seasons of your life, not the success that followed, not the lesson you eventually learned, the season itself. Who remained beside you? Who quietly disappeared? Who became stronger? Who revealed qualities you never expected? Now ask yourself one final question. If someone had watched your behavior during that same season, what would they have learned about your character? Because pressure is never simply a test of other people. It is also a mirror, one that reflects the habits, the values, and the person we have slowly become over the years. Transition pressure reveals character, but there's another force that quietly shapes every relationship long before pressure ever arrives. Trust, how it's built, how it's broken, and why it takes years to earn, yet only seconds to lose. That's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 6. Trust is built in drops and lost in buckets. Imagine lending someone your favorite book, not because they asked, but because you trusted them. Days turn into weeks, weeks become months. Eventually, You ask if they finished reading it. Oh, I forgot. A few more weeks pass. The book is returned. The cover is bent. Several pages are folded. Coffee stains cover the first chapter. The book itself can be replaced. But something else has quietly changed. Not the friendship. Not yet. The trust. Because trust rarely disappears all at once. It fades through small disappointments that quietly accumulate over time. One broken promise, one excuse, one careless decision, then another and another, until one day you realize you're no longer as confident as you once were. That's the nature of trust. It isn't built through grand speeches. It isn't created by impressive first impressions. It grows slowly, one small action at a time. And that's exactly why it's one of the most valuable things any person can possess. With consistency. Many people believe trust is created through honesty alone. Honesty certainly matters, but honesty without consistency rarely lasts. Imagine someone who always says the right thing. They promise to call. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. They promise to arrive on time. Occasionally they do. Occasionally they don't. Every individual mistake seems small, easy to forgive, easy to explain. But together, they begin creating uncertainty, and uncertainty slowly weakens trust. Now imagine someone different. They don't make dramatic promises. They simply do what they say, day after day, month after month, year after year. Eventually, you stop questioning whether they'll follow through, because their actions have already answered that question. Trust grows when behavior becomes predictable, not predictable in personality, predictable in integrity. People feel safe around those whose values remain steady, even when circumstances change. The smallest promises matter most. Many people wait for big opportunities to prove they're trustworthy. They imagine heroic moments, life-changing decisions, extraordinary acts of loyalty. But trust is rarely built that way. More often, it's built through ordinary moments. Returning a phone call when you promised, arriving 5 minutes early instead of 5 minutes late, keeping private conversations private, admitting a mistake before someone else discovers it. These actions seem almost invisible, yet over time, they quietly shape your reputation. Think about someone you trust deeply. Chances are, it isn't because they once did something extraordinary. It's because they've done hundreds of ordinary things, extraordinarily well. Trust is simply consistency, observed over time. That's why small promises deserve the same respect as large ones. Every promise you keep strengthens confidence. Every promise you ignore quietly weakens it. Trust is tested when no one is watching. It's easy to behave well when people are paying attention. It's easy to appear generous when praise is guaranteed. It's easy to speak about integrity when your reputation depends on it. But what happens when no one is watching? That question reveals more than almost any interview ever could. Character doesn't appear because an audience is present. Character appears because values remain the same, even after the audience disappears. Imagine finding a wallet on an empty street. No cameras, no witnesses, no possibility of recognition. Your decision in that moment says far more about your character than 100 conversations about honesty. The same principle applies every day. How you speak about people who aren't present. How you respond to opportunities that nobody else will ever know existed. How you behave when doing the right thing costs you something. Those quiet decisions become the invisible foundation of trust, because the habits you practice in private eventually become the reputation people experience in public. Broken trust never instantly. One of the greatest misunderstandings about trust is believing that a sincere apology immediately restores it. Apologies matter. They demonstrate humility, responsibility, and the desire to make things right. But trust doesn't return because someone says, "I'm sorry." It returns when new behavior repeatedly supports those words. Imagine someone breaking a valuable piece of glass. They may apologize sincerely, but the glass doesn't repair itself overnight. Relationships work in much the same way. Words begin the healing. Consistent action completes it. That's why rebuilding trust often takes far longer than breaking it. One careless moment may last only seconds. Restoring confidence may require months. sometimes years. The good news is, trust can grow again, but only when actions consistently prove that genuine change has taken place. Become the person others never have to doubt. Perhaps the greatest compliment anyone can receive isn't "you're talented" or "you're successful." It's hearing someone say, "if they gave me their word, I know they'll keep it." That kind of reputation cannot be purchased. It cannot be demanded. It cannot be created through appearances. It is earned quietly, patiently, one decision at a time. Every honest conversation, every responsibility accepted, every promise honored, every difficult choice made with integrity. Over time, people stop wondering whether they can trust you because your life has already answered that question. And once trust becomes your reputation, influence follows naturally. Not because you ask people to believe in you, but because you've already given them every reason to. Reflection. Think about the person you trust more than anyone else. Now ask yourself, what earned that trust? Was it one extraordinary moment or hundreds of ordinary moments, repeated with consistency? Now turn that question inward. If someone described your character using only your actions over the past year, would the word trustworthy naturally come to mind? Or would there still be promises waiting to become habits? Because every single day, whether we notice it or not, we are teaching people exactly how much confidence they can place in us. Transition trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. But even trust has an enemy, an invisible force capable of destroying communication, creating misunderstanding, and separating people who genuinely care about each other. That enemy is assumption. And in the next chapter, we'll discover why the stories we invent inside our own minds often cause more damage than reality ever could. Chapter 7, The Dangerous Stories Your Mind Creates. Imagine receiving a message from someone you care about. You reply almost immediately. An hour passes. No response. 2 hours become 6. By the end of the day, your mind has already written an entire story. Maybe they're upset with me. Perhaps I said something wrong. Maybe they don't want to talk anymore. The next morning, your phone finally rings. "I'm so sorry," they say. "My phone died yesterday, and I didn't realize until this morning." Nothing had changed. The relationship was never in danger. The silence wasn't rejection. Yet, for an entire day, you suffered because of a story your own mind created. This happens far more often than most people realize. Human beings don't simply react to reality. We react to the meaning we assign to reality. And sometimes, that meaning has very little to do with the truth. As uncertainty. There is something the human brain dislikes more than almost anything else: uncertainty. Whenever information is missing, the mind immediately begins filling in the blanks. Not because it's trying to deceive us, but because it desperately wants certainty. Imagine seeing two coworkers talking quietly. The moment you walk past, they suddenly stop speaking. What does your mind say? Were they talking about me? Maybe. But perhaps they had simply finished their conversation. Perhaps one of them received an important phone call. Perhaps they were discussing something completely unrelated. The problem is, our minds rarely wait for evidence. They rush to conclusions because certainty feels safer than uncertainty. Unfortunately, false certainty can be far more dangerous than honest uncertainty. Once we believe the story we've invented, we begin treating it as though it's a fact, and our behavior changes accordingly. Without realizing it, we've started responding to imagination instead of reality. Assumptions quietly damage relationships. Many relationships don't end because of betrayal. They end because of assumptions. A friend forgets to call. You assume they don't care. A partner seems distracted. You assume they're losing interest. A colleague doesn't smile one morning. You assume they're upset with you. One assumption creates another. Soon, an entire emotional conversation is taking place inside your own mind. Meanwhile, the other person has absolutely no idea it exists. Perhaps they're simply tired. Perhaps they're worried about a family member. Perhaps they're carrying a burden they've never spoken about. Yet instead of asking, we assume, and assumptions slowly create distance where none needed to exist. That's why emotionally intelligent people develop an important habit. When information is missing, they ask questions before drawing conclusions. Curiosity protects relationships. Assumptions quietly destroy them. Facts. Calm re-looking at the sky on a cloudy afternoon. From a distance, the clouds appear dark and threatening. You might assume a storm is coming. Then the wind changes, the clouds slowly drift away, and the sky becomes clear again. Nothing about the clouds actually guaranteed a storm. It was only your interpretation. Our thoughts often behave the same way. Not every thought deserves to be believed. Not every fear deserves to become a conclusion. When emotions begin creating stories, pause. Ask yourself 3 simple questions. What do I actually know? What am I assuming? What evidence supports this conclusion? Those questions create something incredibly valuable: distance. Instead of becoming trapped inside emotion, you return to observation. Instead of reacting to assumptions, you begin responding to facts. That small habit alone can prevent countless unnecessary conflicts throughout your life. Replace judgment with curiosity. One of the most powerful questions you can ever ask is surprisingly simple. What else could be true? Someone cancels dinner at the last minute. Instead of assuming disrespect, ask yourself, what else could be happening? Someone responds briefly to your message. Instead of assuming anger, ask, could they simply be busy? Someone seems unusually quiet. Instead of assuming rejection, wonder, I wonder what they're going through today. Curiosity doesn't guarantee you'll always be right, but it dramatically reduces unnecessary misunderstanding. It keeps your mind open, flexible, patient, and those qualities make better observers, better friends, better partners, and better leaders. Because understanding rarely begins with certainty. It begins with curiosity, reflection. Think about the last misunderstanding you experienced. Now ask yourself honestly, how much of it was caused by facts and how much was created by assumptions? If you had paused, asked one more question, or waited one more day, would the outcome have been different? Most of us have suffered far more from the stories we created than from reality itself. Perhaps wisdom isn't seeing more. Perhaps it's believing less. Until evidence quietly earns your trust. Transition. You've learned to recognize patterns, to observe behavior, to understand the influence of emotion, and now to question the stories your own mind creates. But there is one final lesson, perhaps the most important lesson of all, because after observing others, understanding yourself, and learning to separate facts from assumptions, one question still remains. How do you use all of this knowledge without becoming cynical? The answer lies in learning the difference between awareness and judgment, and that's where our journey comes to an end. Final chapter. Observe without becoming cynical. Imagine walking through a beautiful forest for the first time. Someone hands you a map, not to tell you where every tree stands, not to predict every path you'll take, but simply to help you understand what you're looking at. The map doesn't make the forest less beautiful. It makes you more aware. Understanding people works the same way. Everything you've learned throughout this audiobook, reading behavior, recognizing patterns, questioning assumptions, understanding emotions, observing character under pressure. None of these lessons were meant to make you suspicious of everyone you meet. They were meant to help you see more clearly. Because there is an important difference between awareness and cynicism. Awareness says, I'll pay attention before reaching a conclusion. Cynicism says, I already know people can't be trusted. One keeps your mind open, the other closes it. One creates wisdom, the other creates fear. The goal of this journey has never been to make you doubt people. It's been to help you understand them more deeply. Is more than their worst moment. One of the easiest mistakes to make, after learning about human behavior, is believing you've learned how to judge people. But observation is not judgment. They're two very different skills. Every person has moments of weakness, moments of fear, moments they wish they could take back. If someone judged your entire character based on your single worst day, Would that be fair? Probably not. The same kindness should be extended to others. Wise observers don't ignore mistakes, but neither do they define people by isolated failures. Instead, they continue watching, they continue listening, they continue allowing patterns to reveal the larger picture, because one mistake may reveal emotion. A lifetime of choices reveals character. Understanding this difference protects you from becoming unnecessarily harsh. It reminds you that people are capable of growth, of learning, of changing. And sometimes the person standing before you today is no longer the person they were years ago. The greatest observer begins with himself. Throughout this audiobook, we've spent a great deal of time observing other people, their habits, their reactions, their patterns, their values. But perhaps the most important person you'll ever observe is yourself. Ask yourself, when pressure enters your life, who do you become? When nobody is watching, what choices do you make? When you're disappointed, do your actions still reflect your values? These questions aren't meant to create guilt. They're meant to create awareness. Because the more honestly you understand yourself, the more compassion you'll naturally develop toward others. Self-awareness makes better observers, better leaders, better partners, and better human beings. The journey toward understanding others always begins by understanding yourself first. Choose wisdom over judgment. Knowledge is powerful, but wisdom determines how knowledge is used. Imagine learning everything in this audiobook, only to spend your life constantly analyzing everyone around you, questioning every word, searching for hidden motives, expecting disappointment before trust has even had a chance to grow. That isn't wisdom. That's fear wearing the mask of intelligence. Real wisdom looks different. It observes carefully, listens patiently, trusts gradually, and remains open to being pleasantly surprised. Not everyone deserves unlimited trust, but neither does everyone deserve immediate suspicion. Healthy relationships grow somewhere between those two extremes, where observation is balanced by compassion, and caution is balanced by hope. That balance may be the greatest lesson of all. Final reflection. Before this audiobook ends, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Think about the people who have changed your life, not because they were perfect, but because they were genuine. Perhaps they made mistakes. Perhaps they struggled. Perhaps they didn't always know the right words to say, yet something about them remained unforgettable. It wasn't perfection. It was authenticity. Now imagine someone thinking about you years from today. What patterns would they remember? Would they remember someone who listened more than they judged? Someone who remained calm under pressure? Someone whose words matched their actions? Someone who made others feel safe enough to be themselves? Because in the end, that is how every life is remembered. Not through titles, not through possessions, not through appearances, but through the countless moments where our character quietly touched the lives of others. Final message. The world doesn't need more people who are quick to judge. It needs more people who are willing to understand, people who observe before they react, who listen before they assume, who choose patience over impulse and truth over appearances. If this audiobook has taught us anything, it's that human behavior is never as simple as it first appears. Words can persuade, appearances can deceive, emotions can mislead, but time, consistency, and careful observation almost always reveal the truth. So as you leave this journey, don't try to become someone who can see through everyone. Become someone who sees people more clearly, including yourself, because the greatest wisdom isn't found in discovering other people's secrets. It's found in developing the clarity, the patience, and the emotional maturity to build healthier relationships with everyone who enters your life. One conversation, one observation, one decision at a time. Thank you for listening. And remember, the more deeply you understand human nature, the more wisely you'll choose the people you allow to shape your life. The end.